All right, hello, friends. So it's possible that Peter Levenda responded to my interview with Mark Stavish. Obviously, there's no way for me to know if it was actually Peter Levenda who left the comment, but it was a very lengthy comment, which I actually have a screenshot of. But it was then deleted. But it was a very lengthy comment, and it felt like it had real emotion behind it. So I actually lean towards it actually being Peter Levenda, which is not implausible because my guest, Mark Stavish, is a very prominent person. And so I just want to respond to that. I'm not going to share the screenshotted comment because Levenda, if it was Levenda, chose to delete it, and I'll respect the fact that he apparently doesn't want it out there. I'll respect that. But I want to address a few key points where I think his response was perfectly legitimate, and points where I think it was a little less legitimate. But I also first want to get into First, I just want to make a quick... I feel like I've said this many, many times. I've always tried to make this clear. But also, I mean, dude, I'm kind of new to this whole thing of, like, actually making videos and talking about this stuff. And it's, like, I'm a very curious person who... I have no problem exploring strange ideas, right? I do need to learn that exploring strange ideas in private is different from doing it online, where I'm actually blasting this stuff out there. So that's a lesson to be learned, but I should be more cautious about that. But in my defense, I actually think I have been cautious. I mean, I think in every single video, I always preempt things saying, "Hey, dude, I'm just a seeker. I'm just a pilgrim. If I state anything definitive, I will state it definitively. But generally, I'm just shooting out brain candy, man. I'm just there, I'm just having fun exploring ideas." But one thing that Levenda said was legitimate. There were a lot of things he said that were legitimate, but there was one point where I will right now freely say, if that was you, Mr. Levenda, you were correct. And that is that Peter Levenda, this person, said in the introduction to his comment, he made a remark about how I made a comment about his proven, I think the word was proven, intelligence connections, in which he said, you don't provide a footnote or anything like that. Now, I actually thought, I'm actually a big fan of Levenda's writing. I take it all with a grain of salt, and I'm skeptical about it, but I actually think he's maybe the most entertaining writer going right now. His Sinister Forces series is awesome. And again, I've seen people remark about the Sinister Forces series and about, like, the scholarship of it. Dude, I'm trying to figure the world out just like everybody else, but I'm also just having fun. I think the series is fascinating, fun brain candy, and I get the people out there that shoot it down for scholarly reasons. I totally get that. But there are things I come at from a scholarly perspective, and then there's things I come at just for fun. And I probably need to learn the difference now that, like, I'm actually putting myself out there. These are lessons that I need to learn, right? But, yeah, so I mean, I dig the Sinister Forces series because it's fascinating, man. And I read the kind of the irony of what I think was Levenda's response to me is that I was asking the questions about Levenda and the Son of Sam and the Necronomicon the same way I read his Sinister Forces series. Like, I'm just looking at things kind of fun and just making these strange connections and trying to figure things out. I am very wary, very cautious, whether it's in public or in private, about drawing any definitive conclusions about anything that I can't know for certain. I think when you start doing that, that's just your ego talking. That's not a sincere desire to understand, and that's not the spirit of a seeker. That's just your ego talking. And I'm not trying to be egotistical, and I'm not doing any of this stuff in the spirit of, like, trying to put out my vision of the world and tell everybody how it is. Dude, I'm trying to figure things out, man. I think of it as like me with a bunch of friends being like, yo, let's look into this stuff and figure this out. And I actually don't really much like to associate with people who make extremely definitive, who believe they've got all the answers. I think that's kind of a diseased perspective, honestly. So that's my general overview. So I want to say that I actually thought that Levenda himself had admitted his own intelligence connections, and so that's where I got that from. But I will give credit where credit is due, because after I read Levenda's comment in which he said, how cool it is to be characterized as having intelligence connections. It happens to me all the time. And then he goes into the Necronomicon. In this statement, let me also say, he doesn't come out quite and say it, but he's basically, again, asserting that he is not Simon, the supposed person who brought the Necronomicon forth. People look all over the internet. You look at, I actually don't know anybody who doesn't think Simon is Peter Levenda. That doesn't mean it's true. I'm just saying that is what I've always seen on the internet, and I've always tried to make that clear and say, this is what I see people saying. I don't have any. How the hell would I know, man? I don't know. I'm just saying the fact is, this is a fact, that there are a whole lot of people who say that Peter Levenda is Simon. Looking at the evidence, it seems to me that Simon and Peter Levenda are the same, and but I don't know for sure, and I don't think there's anything negative in Peter Levenda pretending he isn't Simon if he is Simon, because I don't know what the motive. I don't know what's going on in the background. Maybe he has perfectly good reasons for not wanting to own up to being Simon if he is Simon. I don't know, man. I don't know, But anyway, when I say that, I don't mean anything accusatory in it or anything. I have no bad vibes towards people until I know for certain that they are a bad person. I don't know. Like I have said repeatedly, I actually left these comments on previous videos. I instinctively like Peter Levenda. Like when I see his interviews, I'm like, this is a dude I like, man. But our instinct fails all the time. When I step back and look at things objectively, it's like, there's some questionable things going on there where I'm not exactly sure what his agenda or motivation is. But I don't know. I'm just speaking, right? But that is a fair statement by Peter Levenda, because I actually, once he said that, I looked around and I was like, you know what? I don't actually have there was a thing where he showed up. I thought he showed up on a CIA fraternal organization or something like that, like a fraternal organization for ex-CIA members or current CIA, something like that. But that's where I mainly got it from. But I also thought he had owned up to it in his days as a wandering bishop, and in the way that world intersects with intelligence agencies. But regardless, his point about that is correct, and that was irresponsible of me. I just shouldn't have said that. I should have made it clear that it is widely believed that he has some kind of intelligence connections. And I also want to say that when I say somebody has intelligence connections, that's not necessarily a negative thing, man. I love the United States of America. There are shady things that happen all over in our military, in our intelligence agencies, etc. But that doesn't mean that our military and intelligence agencies in general are bad. I don't believe that. If other people believe that, I mean, maybe. I don't know. I don't have the definitive answers to anything, right? Again, I'm a seeker, I'm a pilgrim, but I'm a patriot, and I love this country. And if I see people who have some kind of ties to something, it makes me curious. In this case, it does add to the curiosity of, like, was there something nefarious going on there? But again, it's just curiosity. I don't know. And actually, I made previous videos where I was talking about the Chaos by Tom O'Neill, and Reeve Whitson, who appears to have been Manson's Charles Manson's handler back in the day. And I basically made a defense of Reeve Whitson, and from that I said, I think it's only fair to look at all of that stuff that happened there from the accurate lens of what seems to be the fact that there was a Soviet subversive intelligence campaign being launched in America, or being undertaken in America, and that American agents were fighting against that. And so when we look at things like MKUltra, I think it's only fair to look at it within the context of the fact that they had enemies that they were dealing with. And things are not that simple in wartime, man. Things are not that simple in wartime. And yeah, so there's that. But okay, so that addresses that. If that was indeed Peter Levenda, I actually apologize for that, because you're right. I should not have said it was proven. I don't know if I said proven, but I did state it in a way that it was fact. Okay, then the statement went on to defend, to say that the claim that New York City was violent in the 1970s was inaccurate. That's honestly, I've never heard anybody say that before. I thought the 1970s New York was universally known to be high crime and a lot of poverty and all of those kinds of things. So, I mean, I appreciate his point, and yeah, I'm looking at the thing right here, but I don't want to, again, I'm trying to respect the fact that he apparently, if it was Levenda, apparently chose to delete this, which means he didn't want it out there. So I don't want to just read off of it. But the idea that New York was not a dark, dirty, and violent place in the 1970s, is that true? I mean, I'll dig into the books and everything, but I mean, it's my interpretation from reading just mainstream history that New York City was very violent in the 1970s and the 1980s as well. It doesn't mean, I'm sure there were also good things happening there, but I don't really think that's a controversial statement, but I could be incorrect. I mean, I don't know. I guess I'll look into 1970s New York more and maybe find out that there was no violence or anything there. I don't know. But, okay, and so then another point that he was making, alright, I'm actually looking at this right now. Oh, okay, so he was talking about the occult renaissance that happened in the Warlock shop and the Magical Child, and how it was a positive thing as opposed to a negative thing. Okay, there's a couple layers to that, but number one, what I want to clarify, and I actually thought of this, the second I asked Mark Stavish this question, I realized I had framed it improperly. Because when I was talking about the fact that, the claim that members of the Son of Sam cult, and this claim, Levenda himself wrote this in Sinister Forces, but it also appears in Dead Names, which is ostensibly by Simon. Either way, Levenda himself said this in Sinister Forces, that I believe, if I remember correctly, that members of the Son of Sam cult would hang out at the Warlock gift shop. And so when I brought that up, I was not insinuating that the Warlock shop was involved in anything. I mean, I realized that right after I asked the question of Mark Stavish. I didn't make that clear, and I should have made that clear. I mean, I got some of this from James Wasserman's In the Center of the Fire. James Wasserman being an influential man who has since passed, influential in esoteric occult communities. And he worked at the Warlock gift shop. I read that book because I was interested in it, and because I find James Wasserman to be a fascinating person who I actually admire and respect. Well, to the limited extent that you can as somebody who has just read somebody's books. I never knew the guy. My impression is that he was a good dude, and some of his ideas definitely don't gel with mine, but so what? There's a lot of good people out there whose ideas don't gel with mine. I'm friends with a Jehovah's Witness. I'm not even close to being a Jehovah's Witness. I don't care. I mean, people can have ideas that I don't agree with, and I can still like them. I can still admire them and respect them. So, yeah, as far as, but my wording might have been sloppy there. And in hindsight, I actually especially, and now I've rambled on so long, I think there probably won't be a lot of people who watch this whole response, but I actually also want to say this to the people who were involved in the Warlock gift shop and the Magical Child. If I was sloppy in the sense that it appeared that I was trying to connect those places to anything nefarious, then I apologize. That actually was not my intent. All I was saying was that it's fascinating and weird that these things were connected, that you had this whole network of stuff going on at the same time, and there were negative aspects under anybody's examination. There were negative aspects to the occult scene, of any occult scene, right? There's always good and there's always bad. And yeah, so I probably should have been a little more careful with my wording there, but I don't know. I'd probably have to go back and look at the videos, because I actually thought I had made that clear. All of these things I think I have actually made clear, but at the same time, I can appreciate the fact that Peter Levenda is a living man. He's a human being who's out there. And yeah, and so, and people who are involved in the Warlock gift shop, the Magical Child gift shop, I mean, they're real. They're out there. They're real human beings. And maybe I should be maybe add another layer of caution on top of this. But it actually kind of bums me out a little bit if people think that I was necessarily criticizing like the Warlock gift shop or the Magical Child. That wasn't my intent at all, man. I'm interested in the connections and the way all these things interweaved, but I'm actually utterly fascinated by 1970s New York, including the 1970s New York occult scene. And the fact that these things were somehow strangely tied into the Son of Sam, which they were actually, now that I think about it, because I saw another documentary about the Warlock shop in which one of the guests said, she mentioned the Son of Sam people coming in. So, yeah, I didn't mean anything bad about that. And actually, the more I'm talking about this, the more I kind of just, screw that, man. I was not implying anything about those shops at all. I was just observing about the connection. And I, in general, have come at this with no disrespect intended for anybody. Well, I have disrespect intended for bad people, but I don't know if anybody in this thing is like everything, as I just said. I don't know exactly what's going on. And Peter Levenda, he is a prominent enough person that you can't have these. Well, it's hard to have these conversations without discussing him to some extent. And in that, there's going to be some musings. But I've made no assertions about anything. And I would not make any assertions. It's actually a weird position because, as I've said, I'm actually a Peter Levenda fan in general. I wouldn't be if I saw some kind of definitive evidence that he had done something wrong, but I've seen none of that. I'm actually a fan in general of his work and his thinking. And yeah, so I don't know. I'm really starting to ramble here, but I want to be clear about my thoughts on this whole thing. And I think there was one other point that I wanted to... the only thing I would ask is, number one, as I've just said, I should have been more clear about some of my thinking, but if Peter Levenda were to somehow see this response, if that was the real Peter Levenda that left that comment on my board, I would say this, Mr. Levenda. In Sinister Forces, you say that Fred Chrisman, or you suggest that Fred Chrisman had been a member of the OSS, which is actually a suspicion that I share, I find interesting. And I don't have a negative view of Fred Chrisman, I would like to say. I actually have a very... my view of Fred Chrisman is a lot more complex than a lot of people put out there. And if you were part of the OSS, I think that would be awesome, because the OSS killed Nazis, which is awesome. So, to me, looking at that tie is not a negative thing. But anyway, and so Peter Levenda says that. I have been able to find no evidence of Chrisman's OSS ties. Doesn't mean it's not true, it just means there's no evidence of it. But all I would say to Levenda, if that was indeed your response, and if you're indeed watching this, all I would say is, I'm trying to figure out things just like you and just like anybody else, assuming you are just trying to figure out things and you are not trying to direct people's thinking as some kind of social engineering psyop, which I don't know, right? Like, again, I'm just talking about possibilities. I think I've read every book by Peter Levenda. So my point is, in discussing those things, you come upon this thing about Fred Chrisman, and it's all part of your general idea, your Sinister Forces. The whole Sinister Forces is taking all these weird happenings and tying them together in a net and trying to create a narrative, which is what I think is so fun about the book. And that's all I'm doing, man. I'm not making any claims about anything. And when I do make a claim, I will say this is a definitive fact and this is the source. Right now, I'm just thinking about things, man, and exploring, and yeah, that's about it. And it's actually, as this experience that I'm in has progressed, it has made me realize that I need to be more careful when I'm just having fun and throwing ideas out there, and when I am making assertions. I actually thought I had been pretty clear about that, but I will double check my efforts to make sure. Because number one, I have no interest in throwing out my ideas as though they are some kind of facts, because this world is crazy right now, man. And we don't need more of that, right? Like, I'm trying to find and understand the truth. And then other times I'm just having fun. But at no point am I trying to spread damaging, misleading information. And it actually kind of bums me out to think if I have failed in that, because that's something I take very seriously. And if I have, and I'm going to, redouble my efforts to make sure I'm more careful in those things. I am going to do that. But in general, some of the other things that were in that possible comment from Mr. Levenda, as I just said, I don't know how valid they are. The claims about New York not being violent. It's an interesting claim, and I'll look into it. The idea of the Warlock gift shop, I think that's just a misunderstanding. I wasn't actually trying to imply anything nefarious about those stores. And what was the other thing? What was the other big point in the comment? I actually cannot remember what it was, but I think I already went over it, so it's okay. If anybody's actually listened to this point, you have heard it. So, yeah, man, that's where I stand on all this stuff. And, yeah, it's really kind of surreal, man, to, if that actually was Peter Levenda, man, that is straight up surreal that I actually got a comment from him. But, yeah, dude, you know what, man? I have no ill will towards anybody. Like, this is, I should have been more careful with my language there. But in general, I'm exploring ideas the same way that Sinister Forces explores ideas. And, I made no definitive claims about anything, except my wording about the intelligence connections may indeed have been sloppy. And I will own up to that. I will own up with that, and I will do better to not do that anymore. Although I would also like to qualify that. And this is something I need to qualify into the future. But when I say that somebody has intelligence connections, that doesn't even necessarily mean that it's a bad thing. Like I said, I'm not anti-U.S. military or anti-U.S. intelligence agencies, although some aspects of those things have indeed been nefarious and bad. But, yeah, so I probably do need to be more careful about those things. But, yeah, so that's about it. The whole thing's kind of a bummer, man, because I'm mainly just trying to have fun. And now realizing that it's not that simple. It's not just this thing. I've also received some emails from people of all kinds that have made me realize that, there is something about putting your ideas out there in the world, whether it's being in written form or in video. There's something about simply putting the ideas out there that people automatically start taking it more seriously than if you're just sitting in a living room talking with a bunch of people, just shooting, just throwing ideas around. And I definitely need to be more careful about that, and I need to be on top of that. But anyway, I'm really rambling. And yeah, like I've said in previous videos, and like I'm saying right now, I'm a positive and optimistic person, and I want to be careful about getting myself tied up into these corners that live in the dark rabbit holes. That's not me. That's not where I'm trying to go with any of this, and that's not what I'm trying to say, or it's certainly not what I'm trying to spread. And so I'm going to be more careful now. I'm going to be much more cautious with how I approach things when I delve into topics, especially when I'm delving into topics with people who are alive. Yeah. It's a really weird thing when you just make videos in your own living room, because, you feel like you're just in your own living room, and it's kind of easy to forget. Like, no, you're putting this stuff out there. But anyway, let none of this. I'm not like this video is not being made to say that to say one way or the other, whatever Peter Levenda or anybody else's unproven objectives are, whatever, whether that be positive or negative. But it is common courtesy and just intellectual integrity to own up when you make a mistake like I did with that wording. And and so I'll do that. I'll own up to it. And as for the rest of the response that may or may not have been from the real Peter Levenda, I actually find it very interesting, and I'm going to dig into that. I find the claim about New York's history to be questionable, but so what? There's a whole range of things in this world that I don't know, so I'm going to look into that. Maybe the whole projection of the violence and degeneration of the place has been exaggerated or invented wholly out of cloth. I don't know. I'll find some history books from all sides of it and dig into that. That'll be interesting. And but the whole thing about the magical child, that has no merit whatsoever. It sucks if it came across that way, but I am not saying that those stores or anybody involved with them were nefarious. I'm actually fascinated by it, and I know negative feelings about that, but maybe that was on me for not making that more clear when I discussed it. Maybe, possibly, but either way, it is what it is. So peace out, everybody. Mr. Levenda, if you actually responded to the video and you actually left that response, I hope you had time to listen to this response to your response. And all right, peace out.